ก็ขอโอกาสได้สารธรรมในช่วงธรรมะกนิธาวันนี้เป็นวันที่8 กุมภาพันธ์ 2566ก็ถือโอกาสที่นำได้ปรารภธรรมคือท่ามกลางความมืดยังมีแสงสว่างเล็กๆต้องขออภัยที่อยู่ตรงที่สวนธรรมเวรุวันนนท์แถวนั้นไม่ได้มีไฟฟ้าแต่อาศัยแสงโซลาร์เซลล์ที่ธรรมชาติเก็บไว้ธรรมะกนิธาวันนี้คงจะเป็นการให้ความและกำลังใจในบทเพลงที่เราได้ยินเสียงดนตรีนี่เป็นเสียงการต่อแคนของพ่อแคนพ่อสวัสดิ์บ้านดอนไผ่นี่เองแล้วก็ได้บันทึกไว้เป็นบทเพลงสรรเสริญพระบารมีที่ทำให้เราท่านทั้งหลายได้ยินเพลงนี้ก็เกิดความสุขกายสุขใจเพราะว่าชาติบ้านเมืองเหล่านั้นย่อมมี3ก้อนเศร้าคือชาติศาสนาพระมหากษัตริย์ถ้าหากชาติไม่มีพระศาสนาคุ้มกันไม่มีองค์กษัตริย์ผู้ปกครองผู้คุ้มครองชาติศาสนาแล้วตั้งแต่อดีตถึงปัจจุบันนั้นประเทศชาติไทยเรานั้นบรรพบุรุษเอาเลือดเนื้อเอาชีวิตเข้าแลกจึงได้อยู่จนเป็นทุกวันนี้ทั้งหลายก็จึงภาคภูมิใจก็จงมีความภูมิใจว่าเรามีชาติกำเนิดมีบรรพบุรุษหลายคนหลายท่านพัดถิ่นไม่มีที่อยู่อาศัยไม่มีญาติไม่มีที่เชื้อชาติที่จะคุ้มครองแต่เราของนั้นถือว่าบรรพบุรุษไทยได้นำเอาเลือดเอาเนื้อเอาชีวิตเข้าแลกดังนั้นท่านทั้งหลายจึงมีความภูมิใจเพราะเราได้มีพร้อมทุกอย่าง
เธอคือคนที่ฉันรักมากใจยังบ่อยากจากน้องไปสายบ่น้อคนดีชีวิตอ้ายก็ให้น้องได้ยอมตายแทนน้องได้อีหลีถึงน้องสิกลายเป็นของคนอื่นทำได้บ่น้อคันอายตายสิให้น้ำบ่ยามอายทอบลอบขอคนดีอยากสิถามน้องเบิ่งอีหลีสิให้น้ำบ่มื้อใดอายเศร้าหายใจน้ำตาสิไหลอยู่บ่ชีวิต
Subject I'm going to talk about this evening is one of the difficult subjects to talk about in Buddhism. And the reason I'm going to talk about it is because someone asked me the question yesterday, and also they asked me just before I came in here on the subject of non-self. Because many people who come across Buddhism read the books, and they come across that idea, that concept, that teaching, they find that many of the other teachings of Buddhism they can accept very easily. It makes such a lot of sense. They usually get stuck on that one about non-self. So this evening I'm going to see if I can unstick you on that sort of question, to understand exactly what is meant by that teaching and how it is applied and how it will add value to your happiness. First of all, that teaching of non-self is just to point out a very deep and profound truth which actually does set Buddhism apart from almost every other religion of our culture, saying that ultimately there's nothing there, it's complete emptiness. However, that is a realization which can only be achieved through the very deepest of the meditations. It's not something that you can hope to find just by thinking about it, because on the surface it goes against what most people take as common sense. And that's one of the reasons why people have difficulty with that idea, because it tends to grate against what we think is true, what is apparent to our experience, what we take to be common sense. However, I think everyone should be a bit careful on this thing called common sense, because sometimes the truth is a little bit deeper than that. And you've all heard how that sometimes Buddhists talk about these things as being illusory, or rather delusory, like a magician pulling a rabbit out of a hat, or sort of sawing a person in half. There's so much illusion which can go on there that we should be careful about common sense. And indeed, the greatest insights which come from deep meditation, enlightening insights, are those ones which are uncommon and which actually strike one very deeply and actually completely change the way one looks at oneself, at others, and the world. And certainly after great insights, it seems, that's obvious. But before that, one just could not see it. And I'm sure that you've had many occasions in your life when you haven't been seeing clearly, but you didn't know it. And it took something, some shock, some even sort of violent or tragic circumstances which actually change the way one looks at things. So be careful of common sense. The actual teaching of non-self is something which can only be seen after deep meditation, and it does actually shock one. It does take you into a different way of seeing things. However, that these experiences of understanding, of insight, which create greater sense of freedom, peace, and happiness in one's life, that's the end result, that's the culmination, the finale. Then there's many smaller insights which come along the way. And it's those smaller insights which come along the way and build up to that great insight, which I also want to talk about today, because that's also where one can get a handle on this thing which we call non-self, anatta. Because Buddhism was never supposed to be just a philosophy to be taught about over coffee tables and to be thought about and have books written about it. Something far more practical. The only reason it's lasted this long and gone to so many different countries is it's actually added to the quality of life of human beings. And the way that the idea, the concept of anatta, non-self, can add to the quality of one's life is helping one let go, helping one detach, helping one feel more freedom. Because whenever there is a sense of self, sense of me, an ego, there'll always be a sense of like mine, what I want, what is mine, what is under my control, what I need, what I have to do. Because these things always go together, the I and the mine. If you start to look at the sense of self in those terms, you're getting much closer to getting a grip on this thing we call self or soul. Because when you start to ask people, self or soul, what actually is it? We have a feeling for what it is in our mind. When you ask a person, who are you? What is this thing in the center of you? What is this person, this me, this self, this soul, whatever you wish to call it? We have like a sort of idea there's something there, but of course it's very hard, impossible even actually to put it into words, to give it some sort of substance and color and shape. So instead of actually asking what a thing is, there's another very beautiful technique to get a handle on things. Instead of what it is, what does it do? The same way you say, what is a car? It doesn't really matter. It might be metal with 4 wheels. That's not necessarily a car. It's what it does which makes it a car. So what does a self, what does a soul, what does it actually do? Have you ever noticed these things, that if something does nothing, if it just sits there, just like this microphone or like this bell over here, it's not a being. It's not a person. It's not an animate thing. To be a being, it has to do something. This is actually almost like the definition of being. So to put it into a nutshell, as I mentioned here for the last time I talked about anatta, there was these 3 very famous philosophers in Western culture. The earliest one was René Descartes, who once said, to be is to do. You notice the equivalence of those 2, being and doing. If you don't do anything, you're not being. To be is to do. But it was actually Jean-Paul Sartre, the existential philosopher in France, who actually turned it around. Instead of is to be is to do, he said, to do is to be. He was the activist. It was only very, very later, just after the Second World War, when a great American philosopher actually put them all together. And he wrote in this beautiful articulate piece, doobie doobie doo, and that was Frank Sinatra. And that was just to show that that's an old joke, but it's a very good one. It's sometimes that people get on these talks about anatta and philosophy and they take it far too seriously. But there is a lot of truth there that a self, a soul, a me, a person is what does it do? What's its function? What's its purpose? Now, the whole purpose of a self, of a me, is actually to do something, to create, to own, to get involved in the world. It's the same with the idea of a God, Because the idea of a soul and the idea of a God go together. Now, a God has to do something to be, certainly to be relevant in society, in the world. The idea of a God just starting off the universe and then sort of having a holiday for the rest of creation, it makes it irrelevant, doesn't it? Okay, so it might have pressed the button, but who cares afterwards? To be relevant, it's got to keep on doing something, create a few miracles or disasters or something or other. Otherwise, it's completely irrelevant. It just shows to do is to be is to do. The same way in a person. So what do we actually do? Or rather, what do we actually own? What is our area of responsibility? In the same way, using a simile of a worker in a company. What do they do? What's their area of responsibility? What part of the company do they control? This is your company here. What do you actually control? What do you do? This is where we can start to really understand the usefulness of the Anatta doctrine. Because you understand, you've all experienced big egos, big bosses, big politicians, big presidents, the Führer. These are people who want to control the whole world. They've got such huge egos. There's many other people, they want to control their company or their monastery. Somebody actually, we just got a new committee, and on our committee, we have the telephone numbers of all of the committee members, from the president, the secretaries, treasurers, and even me. So I'm supposed to be the spiritual director. But I don't know whether it was a joke or it was a Freudian slip, but someone wrote Ajahn Brahm, spiritual dictator. People with big egos want to control even the Buddhist societies. But, and you understand just how much suffering that is, and how much problems that sort of makes when people want to be control freaks. How many of you want to control your family? Control your husband, your wife, your kids? That's a bit of a control freak as well, isn't it? And what happens when you start to do things like that? Can you see that when you really try to control so much, that you get into a lot of suffering? And after all, what does non-self mean? This isn't me, this isn't mine. So the whole idea of actually getting to grips with non-self is like using the, what do you own? What do you think you control? What is your business anyway in life? Do you really own your children? Do you own your wife, your husband, your parents? Now, I'm sure that many of you have been in relationships which have been very domineering. Just how painful, how much suffering there is. Some of you may be privileged to be in relationships where you never feel like you're owned, but you're respected. Where you're not dominated, but that you're taken as an equal partner. And this is realizing that that person isn't mine. It's not my wife. That's another person there, with their own sort of rights, with their own responsibilities, with their own sensitivities, but certainly not mine. When you have like a boss in a company who thinks that it's your work, they're paying you anyway, so you can tell them what to do, that's a terrible situation to be in. Same in a relationship with another person. When they're controlling you, it's a terrible relationship. And after all, that other person, people should know, of course they're not yours. They came into your life, they're going to leave your life. The same with your children. How many parents get into a lot of problems and suffering because they think the child who's been born from their womb is my child, my son, my daughter? I was trying to mention last week that you just give that person a body, and you train them, you look after them, give them an education, feed them. Where that person came from, the important part of them, their mind, their stream of consciousness, whatever you wish to call it, their character, coming with all its karma from past life, who knows where that came from? When a woman becomes pregnant, got this body in there, just waiting for something to come in. Who knows what will come in? There have been wonderful parents who have had monsters for children. There have been monstrous parents who have had saints for children. And of course, you're probably somewhere in between. Although sometimes you think, maybe on the monster side with your children. But why is that? Every sort of child psychologist would know it can never be explained just by genetics or by the situation of the parents or the economics or the whatever else. But there's so many other factors there. It can only be something which comes in to the child from birth, something outside of the parents. So that's why, as a good mother, you should look at your child as someone who's a friend for a few years. Someone who's come into your life but doesn't belong to you. Nature will teach that to you. When your child leaves home, when they go their own way, you realize they're not an extension of you. They're not part of your body like your arm or your leg, which you can tell what to do, but they will go their own way. The sooner one realizes that, children aren't mine. They're just my responsibility for a while. The whole attitude becomes different. Instead of being a controlled, domineering attitude, it becomes a sense of responsibility, a sense of care and love, but a respect for that being as being independent of us. In other words, we can learn how to let go. And even if that child does something we don't like, even really does something, the worst thing that child can do, die. Even then, if we realize that that is not ours, a child has come in according to its own karma, its own nature, and is now gone. We don't need to grieve, to be upset. It wasn't ours in the first place. It came in unbidden. It went without saying farewell. That is the nature of life and death. So the idea of non-self in this sense is realizing that we don't control. It's not a person who owns another person. But deeper than that, be able to let go of our loved ones, be able to let go of our possessions. They're not ours. All the things which you own in this world, your house, your car, your bank balance, doesn't really belong to you. Eventually someone else will take it. If it's not the government, it will be your children or someone else. So when we realize this is not ours, we don't tend to worry about it so much. How often is it that we get into the illusion of ownership? What do you really, truly own? This is what we mean by investigating non-self. What do you really own in life? It's precious little. Your car, your house, your bank balance. This is just only there for a short while. When you realize you don't own it, it means you can very easily let it go when it's time. In Buddhism, we have this idea of like hungry ghosts. Hungry ghosts are so attached to their material possessions that when they die, they keep hanging around. Keep hanging around looking after their possessions, what they think of their possessions. It's attachment. They won't let go. Now, don't be like a hungry ghost. Be able to let go. More importantly, deeper in than our physical possessions and our loved ones, we have this thing called our body. And because we've been with this body so long, sometimes we think we really own this body. That we are this body, we identify with this body. This is again where an illusion of selfhood comes from. Very often that people think that they are sophisticated and wise enough to know this body isn't theirs. One day they've got to leave this body, they've got to die. How many people are really prepared for that? It's always a good test of your understanding of life, of what you can let go of. For example, I was telling somebody earlier today about this man who went to the doctor, and the doctor said only 3 months to live. He was just devastated. I said, well, there's nothing I can do. He said, well, the only thing you can do is to apply mud packs. I mean, apply mud packs. Will that make me healthier? He said, no, it won't make you healthier, but it'll get you used to living in the ground. Thank you. That's the first joke I only heard today. Nevertheless, when we actually look upon this body of ours, how many of us are ready to go in the ground right now? With or without backpacks. But why not? It's because we think that we really own this body of ours. What part of this body do you really own? When you actually start to contemplate this, you're contemplating the way the Buddha asked the monks and the nuns to contemplate. Keep looking at this body of ours. What part of it is yours? If it really was yours, you could actually tell it what to do. But my body goes its own way. Last week I had the flu. I was really quite surprised I got the flu because I went through India and I went through Thailand. They're supposed to be very unhealthy countries, dirty, no cleanliness, especially in India. And I was fine, really fit. Come back to Australia after 8 or 9 days, I'm down with the flu. It shows Australia's a very unhealthy country. So it surprised me. And also, when you get sick, how inconvenient it is. I had all these things to do. It was very inconvenient being sick then. But I couldn't stop it. Nothing you can do to stop sickness when it comes. So you understand that this body does not belong to me. This is not Ajahn Brahm's body. I told many people here before, because as a monk, so I've got even less control than you have, especially less control about what I eat. Because I just get fed by you lot. And you put into my stomach not what I like, but what you think I like, or what you like. Because they got this, especially in Thailand, I'm not quite sure if it's the same in Sri Lanka and Burma, they've got this tradition, this Buddhist tradition, that whatever food you give to a monk or a nun, that's the food which you will get when you go to heaven. So everybody keeps feeding me the food that they want to get when they go to heaven, which is maybe not the type of food I'd like to get when I go to heaven. And so I keep telling people, my stomach no longer belongs to me. It belongs to you lot. So you put into my stomach what you like, not what I like. I've got no control over this. And the rest of my body, again, it doesn't really belong. It belongs to nature. That's what this body belongs to. When nature wants to make it sick, it gets sick. Nothing to do with me. When nature wants to make it old, it gets old. When nature wants to take it back and die, it dies. How many people really want to die? Very, very few people. It's usually, if you want to die, say, no, 1 more week, please. Just so I can, after 1 week, another week, please. It's always like tomorrow. Interesting, even like 80-year-olds. Are you ready yet? No, maybe 1 more week. 90, not quite yet. 100. It's always maybe later on, but not now. Now is inconvenient. So this body does not belong to us. When it doesn't belong to us, you don't worry so much about it. So imagine that sort of, I'm very compassionate, I think, but if any of you get sick, I don't worry about it that much, quite honestly. This it's the same with you, isn't it? I mean, even if someone you're very close to gets sick, do you really worry about it that much? A little bit maybe, but not as much as when you get sick. Come be honest. That's why actually there's a lovely story. It's a very deep story from the time of the Buddha. There's one of his chief disciples was a queen. Now this one of his other disciples was a king. The king had many wives in those days. And they're just really into suffering. Well, but anyway, sort of, men are stupid. That balances it. But anyway, sort of, his wife was also a devoted Buddhist, and the monks, were going arms round into the city every now and again. And one day, the Buddha was going on arms round in the city, and this Queen Malika, his name was looking through the window and saw the Buddha. She was gazing upon this wise, compassionate, amazing monk, just with such wide eyes. It's almost like being obsessed with this monk. And the king saw his chief wife just gazing adoringly at this monk, and he got jealous. So he went up to her and said, "Okay, who do you love more, the Buddha or me?" It was one of those questions which was like double-edged. Whichever way she answered, it seemed she'd get in trouble. But she was wise. She said, to the answer to that question, who do you love more, the Buddha or the king, her husband? She said, "I love myself more." Great answer. And the king thought about that and said, "That's really strange." So he went straight away to see the Buddha, told him what had happened. And the Buddha said, "That's a very wise woman." Most people think we're compassionate. A lot of times, actually what we're really loving is ourselves. Even as I remember reading in a Time magazine many years ago on the psychology of love, when a man and a woman fall in love, actually they say that what they really love is they don't love the other person. They love the way the other person makes them feel. They love that feeling of being in love. So only when the other person is around that feeling is generated inside of them. There's a nice, interesting thing to actually to contemplate, whether that's true or not. The person you love most in this world is yourself. Anyway, when we look upon this body of ours, this is the one we're most concerned with. But if we can only realize that this is not us, this is not me, this is not ours, it's much easier to let it go from time to time, not to worry about it for so much. And so much of illness comes from worry, tension and concern. So if we just let the body go and relax, it tends to get better. A lot of times, people get sort of tensions or pains in the body. And how many times have you had a pain? I thought it was like a heart attack, or I thought it was cancer, or I thought it was foot and mouth disease or something. Have you looked in your mouth recently? Whatever it is. But people worry so much. Like, we have the term hypochondriacs, but we're all hypochondriacs to a certain degree. It's just like, if it really goes over the top and becomes a sort of a big thing. But in this particular case, if we can just let go of our body and realize this isn't our body, this isn't ours, this is one body amongst many we've lived in, we're going to get another body next time, we're not so concerned about it. If through the luck of the draw, the luck of the karma, you've been born ugly in this lifetime, don't worry about it, it's not such a big deal. Next time you may get a better chance. Or if you've been born with, like young men and young women, you're just so concerned, aren't you, about your appearances. And this, especially, at least with men, after a while they can let go of their appearances, but women have to keep worrying about how they look for so many years. And it's so painful. Well, it is, isn't it? Come on, be frank about it. Just without worrying whether, your makeup, your hair's right. But when you become a nun, it's great. You don't have to worry how your hair looks at all. Or your makeup is same. But look, it's when you don't worry so much about sort of your appearances or your bodies, so much more freedom. Sometimes people come to like monasteries or nunneries. Why do you shave your hair? Why do you just wear these robes? Because it's marvelous not to have to worry about what you look like. To be free of that. Because you are not the body. So I don't care what people say about how I look. That's why that classic story many years ago when I was first in Perth, in Magnolia Street in North Perth, that I was in my robes, loading up our vehicle to go back to Serpentine Monastery, and this girl came out. She must have been about 10 years of age. She came out from the house next door, and she looked me up and down with utter disgust. I was just wondering what she was up to, and then she opened her mouth and just, I'm not quite sure how she learned how to do this. She was only 10 years of age, but it was very effective. She said, "You're dressed like a girl. That's sick. Yuck." I always remember that. But of course, I just burst out laughing because I thought it was so funny, and it gave me another nice story to tell on a Friday night. So I thank that girl very much. But, I don't care what I look like. It's okay these days because, people know monks. But, 18 years ago when I first came here, people hadn't got a clue who I was and what were you doing. But you don't care about what you look like. That sort of makes so much more freedom in life. I am not my body. Or if I'm sick, doesn't matter if you get sick. Actually, being sick is a wonderful gift to other people. Gives other people a chance to be compassionate. There's a lot of compassionate people out there who just haven't got the opportunity to practice compassion. So when you get sick, I'm sick, here I am. Now come on, be compassionate. So you get all these lovely monks, these macho monks, whatever you call it, in the monastery looking after me. Really nice. It brings out the sort of the softness in people. So it's wonderful being sick. So if you're sick, you're giving an opportunity for others to practice their compassion. So don't just try and do things for yourself. If you're going to be sick, try and be really sick to give them more opportunities for compassion in the world. But when you're not so worried about your body, then it's very easy to relax and let it go. So many people are so worried about health and how long they're going to live. And that's probably why they die so quickly. So let go, this body's not yours. When it's time for nature to take it back, okay, had a good time together, great time, see you, I won't catch up with you later, goodbye. So you can let go of this body, and also you can let go of other people's body. This body is not yours. At least that much you can see as anatta, not self, not me, not mine. And if human beings could at least do that much, to realize that the body is not a self, all this racism, genderism, other isms about who's the superior body, who's the most beautiful, the most fit, the smartest, or whatever else, it can all just go out the window. It's just bodies, that's all. Not the person. So we don't judge by what you look like, or how fast you can run, or how youthful you look. How tall, how small, how black, how white. All those body things we can just leave aside. Even sick or healthy. So that what quite a lovely advertisement said about, I think, MS is, don't look at the disease, look at the person. That's why that I was just telling the people in the Armadale group last Tuesday, just saying a few of the things which I get up to, talking to the Cancer Support Association. They came to the monastery just a week ago. And someone asked me, well, what do you actually talk to those people about? I tell my jokes. And I told them the story, which is a very good story, that some years ago there was a Buddhist nun, or an Australian nun. She was a Tibetan nun, but we have Tibetan, Theravada, this sort of stuff, but the monks and nuns actually, no matter what tradition, we get on really well together. So she was actually staying in our monastery at Serpentine for a while. And then she got very sick, really sick with cancer. She was actually on her last few weeks at the hospice in Shenton Park. And I would actually go and visit her from time to time when she was there. And then she got very close to her end, and like many people, she knew she only had a couple of days left. I got a phone call in the monastery from her saying, can you come around? Because, I'm going maybe next day, maybe 2 days. So, I stopped whatever I was doing and got in the monastery car, went up to Shenton Park. It's a long way from Serpentine to Shenton Park. And when I got there, you had to check in at the reception, first of all. I checked in the reception and said, I'm just going to come to see this nun. And the receptionist and nurse said, I'm sorry, but she's given absolute instructions that no one is allowed in. She doesn't want to see anybody. I said, well, that's really strange because she rang me only an hour ago. She said, can I come up? And I've just come up. She said, no, absolutely. She said, no, but she must be something wrong here. So the receptionist took me to the door, and pointed at the door, and sure enough, there's a big notice there, absolutely no visitors. Right on the bottom there was, except Ajahn Brahm. So see? So I went in, and I asked her, I said, why did you put that notice on? It was very flattering. Why did you say absolutely no visitors except Ajahn Brahm? What she said was actually very meaningful for me, and I'd like to share it with you this evening because it's very good advice when you go visiting people in such situations. What she said was that, look, all the other people who come and visit me here, they all make me even more miserable because they're so sad I'm about to die and sick. You're the only person who comes in here and treats me as a human being rather than as a dying person. You come in here and tell me jokes. What's the latest one? When you're dying, do you always want to be told, oh, how are you feeling today? When you like a last few jokes at the very end, just to cheer you up, because you're feeling really down, you're feeling sick, you're dying. You just want to sort of be cheered up a little bit, or inspired, or give a few nice instructions on what to do when you do die. But don't be morose or sad about it. There's enough time of that when you're by yourself. When you're with your friends, you want friendship. And so, not seeing the dying